I'll start now. Black youth and especially Black girls are criminalized in the school system. This leads to policing of tone, of behavior, of life. This criminalization is embedded in the presentation of Black girls in media, stripped of agency and steeped in historical misogynoir. Morris 18, the cry 14-year-old Desiree Beckon, who in the summer of 15 was thrown to the ground as well as verbally assaulted by Corporal Caseball after she refused to leave her friends. The image of her helpless, frightened body under his collar, public consciousness to examine overzealous policing and criminalization of Black youth. The result has been an increasing number of Black girls in contact with criminal and juvenile justice systems labeled delinquent is that they have failed to establish a meaningful and sustainable connection with schools. The missing link is exacerbated by the increased reliance of public schools on exclusionary discipline at present, one of the most widely used measures to deal with the problematic student behaviors. The criminalization of Black girls has extended in our schools, disrupting one of the most important protective factors in a girl's life, her education. Some of the most egregious applications of punitive school discipline in the country have criminalized Black girls as young as 6 or 7 years old who have been arrested for throwing tantrums in their school classrooms, yelling and screaming at a teacher and being disruptive of the learning environment. They were never pieced together to present a comprehensive national portrait of how school responses to the disruptive behavior of Black girls pushed them out and rendered them vulnerable to the further victimization and delinquency. For many Black girls, interactions between the justice system and schools often do not begin or end in school. The surveillance in which Black girls are subjected, the punitive responses to either their sometimes poor, sometimes typical decision-making or the reaction to perceived injustice have made contact with law enforcement a frequent occurrence. Black girls are being criminalized in and by the very places that should help them thrive. Policing is a colonial artifact created to maintain racial capitalism, utilizing the right to violence to maintain colonial power. France Fanon, 1961. In the colonies, the policemen and the soldier are the official institute go-between the spokesman of the settlers' rule of oppression. In capitalist societies, the educational system layer, clerical structure, moral reflexes handed down from father to son. The exemplary honesty of workers who are given a medal after 50 years in good and loyal service. The affection would spring from harmonious relations and good behavior. All these aesthetic expressions of respect for the established order create and serve around the exploited person in an atmosphere of submission and inhibition, which lightens the task of policing considerably. Agents have the government speak the language of pure force. The intermediary does not lighten the oppression or seek to hide the domination. He shows them up and puts them into a practice with the clear conscience of an upholder of peace. Yet he is the bringer of violence to the home and the mind of the native. The system of racialized policing is a symptom of persuasive misogynoir. A society built on the foundation of suppressing Black women as captive yet responsible, belabored as the mammy while excluded as a slave. Spillers 87. The new world with its human sequence written in blood represents for its African people a scene of actual mutilation and theft of body from its motive will. The captive body becomes a source of irresistible destructive sensuality. At the same time, instead of contradiction to the captive body, reduces to a thing. The captive sexuality is provide a physical and biological expression of otherness. The flesh is a primary narrative. Then we meet its sphere, divided, room departedness, fruited to the ship's hole, fallen or escaped overboard. The African female subject is the topic of specifically externalized acts of torture and prostration. This materialized scene of unprotected female flesh ungendered offers a praxis and a theory, a text for living and for dying. The captive body brings into a focused gathering of social realities as well as a metaphor. The ruling episteme that releases the dynamics of naming and valuation remains grounded in the originating metaphors of captivity and mutilation, so that if neither time nor history nor historiography. An American grammar begins at the beginning, the violent formation of modern African consciousness during the initiative strikes, which opened the Atlantic slave trade. The integrity of the white body is made possible by violence against black people. Spillers 87. Under her hegemony, the human body becomes a defenseless target for rape and veneration in the body and its material abstract phase, a resource for metaphor. The materialized scene about protecting female flesh, ungendered, subjected to externalized violence, offers a practice in the theory and a method for both reading through their diverse mediations. Even though the captive flesh/body has been liberated, the ruling episteme that releases the dynamics of evaluation remains grounded in the originating metaphors of captivity and mutilation. The human subject is murdered over and over again. We lose any hint or suggestion of dimension of ethics of relatedness between human personality, its anatomical features, between one human personality and another, and between human personality and cultural institutions. The entire captive community becomes a living laboratory. The normalized view of the ideal woman in particular has excluded Black women from spaces and furthered making Black women as other. Fordham 93. Gender diversity is rarely officially acknowledged in the academies. Therefore, like most other women of color, African American women are compelled to consume the universalized image of white American women, including body image, linguistic patterns, styles of interacting, so forth, because womanhood or femaleness is a norm reference to one group. White middle-class American women from social groups who do not share this racial, ethnic, or cultural legacy are compelled to silence or gender passing. Women's movement has perpetrated a type of cultural imperialism that takes the oppression of white women as its norm. Violent signifiers sit and debate comfortably, recreating these hierarchies of civil society, prioritizing a disembodied politic of normative and rational communication that is at at odds with what is accessible to Black women. Read Brinkley 08. News coverage of the Urban Debate League. Journalists consistently utilize racial coverts within the discourse of poverty. Reporters refer to spatial characterization to indicate poverty, but are also marked by Blackness. In a paragraph in a 2004 Christian Science Monitor article, writes urban high school debate teams are defying the odds. Here, the reporter refers to urban students designed to signify both race and class status. Urban city centers constructed as spaces that are run down, dirty, infested with crime and drugs. The phrase defying the odds indicates that poor children are likely to realize a negative expectation assigned to urban needs of color. Odds signifies statistical representation of the ills commonly associated with poverty in an urban city centers. While the students are characterized as not responsible for the economic situation, they are held responsible for the choices they make to change their individual circumstances. Students are constructed as agents of change that must actively avoid the pitfalls associated with lower economic status. How can low income kids break away from failure and get folks to recognize their hidden talents? Talents are hidden and simply need to be unearthed so they might be recognized by others who are able to help. Thus, Ariella and I advocate for an interrogation of our understanding of crime through anagrammatical practice. This is an indictment of both crime as a construct in society and also a critique of modes of presentation within debate.
How violent are we? How violent are you being? She uses poetry. She is not a girl, but a prostitute, sells her body like she has rights. I have barely been taught what to do in the face of violence. I only know the redaction of Black murder that others present to me. Media, analyze. I am a birther of terror, but I also pass on love with the pain I experience. Sweep me up into the sky. I'll show you the real depths of the atmosphere and bring you down to the warmth of this skin.
Sharp 2016, I marked the violence of the quake that deposited the little girl there injured in this archive, and the violence in the name of care of the placement of the taped word on her forehead. And then I kept looking because that could not be all there was to see or say. I had to take care. I was looking for more than violence of the slave ship, the migrant, and the refugee ship, the container ship, and the medical ship. I saw that leaf in her hair, and with it I performed my own annotation that might open the image out into a life. However precarious that was always there, the leaf is still stuck in her, still neat braids, and I think somebody braided her hair before the earthquake hit. Poetry is a means to think of Blackness as anagrammatical. In the place where signification falls apart, slips, and proliferates into new meanings, the presentation of the 1AC is an injunction in the normative meaning-making of debate. Its performance is both an empowering assertion of agency and a forced confrontation with a non-normative reading of Blackness. Unsettling the ingrained system of criminalization, we theorize the violence of Blackness birthed in the belly of the slave ship, which has become the prison. Sharp 2016. Africans packed in to hold the slave ship of the ship were marked according to Euro-Western definitions, not as male and female, but as differently sized weighted property. Under these conditions, she writes, we lose at least gender difference in the outcome of the female body and the male body become a territory for culture and political maneuver, not at all gender related, gender specific. We can see how each has functioned separately and collectively over time to disfigure Black maturity between the womb to a factory producing Blackness as an objective, much like the slave ships hold in the prison and turning the birth canal into another domestic fatal passage with Black mothers still ushering their children into the conditions, their non-status, their non-beingness. They can now allow those incarcerated women in the United States who are forced to give birth while shackled and their pain ignored. They're forced to deliver shackled even when shackling is against the law, birthing in the belly of the state, birth in and as the body of the state. The prison repeats the logic, architecture, and otherwise of the slave ship, which is also being birthed as what I call anagrammatical Blackness that exists in the index of viability and also potentiality. That is, we can see the moments when Blackness open up into anagrammatical in the literal sense, when a word, phrase, or name is formed by rearranging the letters of another. We can also apprehend this in the metaphorical sense, and how regarding Blackness grammatical gender falls away and new meanings proliferate, how letters of sex are formed into a secret message, rearranging them. In that sign, open for cross.
All right. So, how does your plan? Does your plan have solvency outside of this round, or is it just a theoretical experience?
I think that it does. Like, the sharp evidence talks about like Black care and how that's necessary and taking care about each other, creating communities, coalitions. I think that that's good. I think that that can solve on a systemic level. In addition, well, you just said outside of the debate round. So I think the rest of the solvency is explained in context of the debate round.
Mm-hmm. All right.
In addition, like I think that this can be specific to the debate space, but I think it's good at practicing building agency, like in the real world.
Okay, so would you define what you are doing as going through the USFG?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'll be it. I'll run prep. I just stopped. I'm sending it out.
Okay.
I would. How much free time do I have? I didn't hear him say that. My sound went away for like a few minutes.
I stopped it with a minute 30.
Oh, I don't know on that.
Okay. So you have a minute 30 left. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Jeez.
All right. All right, so it's 2 off. Tell me when y'all are ready.
I'm good.
All right.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Okay. Ready.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Okay, first on T. So the affirmative concedes that they are not working through the government. So I'm not going to, not working through the USFG. So I'm not going to spend time arguing about what the definition of the USFG is. That's been conceded in the round. That's what we are talking about here. So completely by their own admission, this does not fall under the resolution because it's not engaging with the USFG. Again, however you want to paint that, what that actually means, they completely agree that they don't engage in it. And so this is a problem and a reason to vote for a number of reasons. First off, it just makes it it makes it difficult to actually have a discussion to go on in a debate round, not just through what they're saying of rejecting the traditional debate space isn't the problem, but what is the problem is the fact that there's not any clear structure that you can engage with. It's simply the affirmative doing their own thing that not only is existing within the round, but is also spilling over, and therefore there's no clear place for the negative to engage. And when that doesn't happen, that's a big problem because it takes away from any of the experience of debate because there's no concrete things to actually have. There's not enough concrete places for the negative to actually engage and to have a counterpoint so that there can be a discussion that's genuinely educational for both sides, and it takes away from a lot of the experience that people want to get when getting into debate, because promoting this kind of debate where there is a forum where we go exclusively on just on full performative theory, it essentially excludes people wanting to get into debate because it continues this what's the word I'm looking for? Narrative that debate in of itself is just people talking about their own theories and their own performances, and it makes it very difficult for actual debater retention to happen, which is like what we see in a lot in the BDL with a lack of novice retention, a lot of moving up to varsity, and a lot of that is because arguments like these are built in a way that they feel exclusive towards a lot of debaters trying to get up into higher divisions, and therefore it makes it a lot harder to actually spread the ideas that you want to put out if you're just not going to engage in a space where people who aren't as experienced understand in that space. And also to bring the counterplan, use the grammatical while creating change through action towards the government, engaging with the government not to endorse it, but to rework it. and radical visions of collective self-determination, uploads modes of community control, reproductive autonomy, and restores protections against political domination. That's Davis 19. Actually, let me just undo that highlighting because I'm going to just read the bold. The denial of community control and collective self-determination is slavery, or at least a badger incident of it. That is not how the court has described slavery, but defining slavery to encompass denial of collective self-determination is as old as the American Republic. It is older than that. Slavery in the South involved denial of black self-determination. This addresses doctrinal challenges to the 13th Amendment's arguments for black collective self-determination. Slavery is a denial of individual self-determination, terrible for men, but more terrible for women. It denied women reproductive autonomy. Bridgewater emphasized the female slave did not have protection against rape. The 13th Amendment may prohibit modern reproductive abuses that deny reproductive self-determination, such as criminal court orders requiring women to implant birth control. The 13th may have implications for justice, criminal justice reform. The 13th Amendment may have implications for the criminal justice reform to increase community control or policing. Slavery denied collective self-determination, as Douglas would later describe it. Blake's plantation was a nation of its own, having regulations and customs, not to mention its own police. Slavery was not a coastal labor. It was also a system of government that denied the collective self-determination of the enslaved. We should see the plantation as the local government of the slaveholding South. Plantation government depended upon excluding black residents from the community and creating a governance to control them. Slave owners had investigate, prosecute, and judge crimes. They taxed labor and disposed benefits and built infrastructure. They legislated and they policed. Self-emancipation was not simply individual self-determination. Individual and familiar acts of resistance collectively beat against slavery. That their cause was similar to the Israelites. A slave on trial testified, "I have nothing more to offer than what Washington would have to offer when taken by the British. I have adventured my life and endeavored obtaining liberty of my country and entered a rebellion plan for July 4th. The Declaration of Independence thought the denial of political self-determination a form of slavery. The Continental Congress defined political domination as slavery. Price support of Burden support of American revolutionaries, arguing the denial of political self-determination was a form of slavery. And common sense Payne warned readers that when Republican virtue fails, slavery ensues. Slavery was a central 18th century discourse. To be governed without one's consent was a slave. Free nations were governed according to their own mind. Revolutionaries drew upon this Republican tradition. Slavery, Douglas argued, was involved in the denial of self-determination. Republican political theory takes slavery as a paradigmic and unjust domain. Slavery involves instrumentalization in which one human treats another as means to satisfy their own aim, and slavery violates non-interference. The slave owner and his arguments interfere with free choices on a daily basis. Slavery involves wrongful domination even when it does not involve actual interference. Threat of arbitrary exercise of power, just as slaves in the American South were usurped by power to direct their own labor and were enslaved by communities usurped of collective self-determination. So essentially, what this card shows is, again, like to go to the top, as it does like show the badges, and as there are descriptions of what badges and incidents of slavery are that are described in the 13th Amendment that aren't essentially covered in today's world. And that doesn't mean that the government itself is unable to be used as an actual method, because specifically those laws are written specifically so that they can be vague enough to be used as oppression. But if then we use the means of the government and we take that and work with that and alter what the actual meaning and outcome ends up being, then it means that using these laws is a genuine way of to empower. And also because within this and within creating a system in which we can change what the views of laws are, that directly leads to a further further gaining of a sense of empowerment within actual communities, and allows for further change to happen, while just purely using the affirmative on its own fails to actually create a situation where there is a feeling of an ability to actually change the world, rather than a self-freeing thing, but instead to actually directly engage the government. Also, did I? Okay, I stopped that timer. Oh, I don't know about that. Is someone else timing?
Yeah, 123 left.
Just back into T, and I also want to talk about why the second thing that I brought up is a voting issue, specifically in excluding younger and inexperienced debaters. That's inherently key to not do, because regardless of if this is a more beneficial form of expression and of involved in debate, the base form of debate is still extremely helpful to people to actually be able to engage in feelings that they feel that they are able to change things. And if there's people not that are feeling excluded from that and don't want to actually head up to upper divisions or even stay in debate in general because there's no end goal that they feel like exists, because there's just nothing that they want to strive to because the upper divisions seem to be too confusing. That leads to direct disengagement with debate, and that is a problem because within using this in the round, it does harm the production of debate, and that needs to be a ballot issue because promoting debate in of itself is the key to actually getting any change through the debate round. So if it directly destroys the amount of people engaging in debate, then it does directly harm the ability for anything to get done.
Okay.
Okay. 1 second. Sure. So we can start now. So why, like, how does the Davis 19 card say what the tagline says? Like,
so basically, it
to the AF.
because it shows that there is specifically what has been used within the government is what is that denial of community control, and therefore that empowerment is what is directly needed. And again, there's, as it shows, there's laws that are worded explicitly vaguely, which means that by changing interpretations of those laws, that doesn't require a complete destruction of the government, but it does entail further modes of self-determination.
So the counter plan is to use anagrammatical practices as well as rewording certain laws in the government?
It's to not only reject modes of racism that happen without the government, but also engage the government and change how the government affects things, and instead of just ignoring the government is essentially what it is, because it's regardless of how much there is voter suppression, to create situations where we can actually change those in office and those who are in law to reinterpret the laws that are
so the next assumes that debaters have control of reinterpreting the laws of the government.
The entire point is not that we on our own completely reinterpret government, but we empower those reinterpretations.
Okay, so you're empowering people who reinterpret the law.
So, I mean, like, you say those reinterpretations, and by doing that, those reinterpretations become more empowered and more in the public sphere, which can lead them to being...
Why do you need the ballot in order to do that? Like, why can't you empower people to reinterpret laws outside of the debate space?
You can theoretically do that, but the point is that we're saying is that we also need to, in any discussion that we're having about like using the AF, there's also no way to do that without also engaging in the government. So therefore, it's a direct flaw with the AF, and therefore it's key to the ballot.
Okay, so you're basically saying that you need the ballot because that's the link to the AF.
Because can you reword the question?
So you're saying that there's like a deficiency within the AF, and in order to solve it, we need to empower people to reinterpret laws. And the reason why you need the ballot to do that is because that's the link to the AF.
I mean, that's why it makes it a better ballot than just an AF ballot, because it's a better solution and it's a better thing to have in these discussions.
Okay. We're gonna take 2 minutes. Tell me when y'all get it.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay.
I see.
Have all the judges got it?
Yeah, and it's not set as a file. It's just in the text.
The order is case then CP, or I guess case CP, there's like T in the middle because the T was just analytics. And yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So it starts with an overview. I will start. Now, Black girls' existence in educational spaces is criminalized, ranging from the tone policing to the literal calling of cops when in 2015 in South Carolina, former officer Ben Fields dragged a Black girl out of her desk and across a classroom for supposedly being disrespectful. The world reacted with shock, but the violence against Black girls is not the exception, but rather the norm. The more evidence indicates that criminalization of Black bodies is embedded into the intersection of policing and education. We can only see how the media captured Dagir's experience as violence. Spillers historicizes the criminalization and violence as a function of slavery and misogynoir, the dual imposition of the expectation of Black women as caregiver and slave as needing to be respectable but never having access to respect. Reed Brinkley further contextualizes it into academia and the portrayal of Black urban debaters. Seen with the negative expectations and violent signifiers, debate needs anti-grammatical practices in order to be ruptured. Moreover, debate will never reach its capacity of critical thought while it refuses the convos the app brings to light. And actually, the fact that anti-grammatical practices are needed in debate was not contested by the neg. In fact, it was just included in the CP, which means we got access to a part of our solvency. Like most of the case was basically dropped. I'm going to continue with the solvency next, but the app prompts debaters to think about whether something is violent or not, as Morris says, and continues like what we should do in the face of violence. And that should always outweigh whether like people or younger people are uncomfortable with joining debate, because like these are important conversations that we're going to have. A bunch of different things can say like, oh, whether you're going to be comfortable or uncomfortable in debate. It could be how your day is going. Like if you're a shy person, if you're an outgoing person. Like I just don't think that the argument on T was fully developed for it to actually count as a voter on lack of participation in the debate space. We denounce the violent signifiers that sit in debate comfortably by that reimagining that is seen in the poem, creating the uncomfortable. As Sharp tells us, Blackness is anagrammatical, incomprehensible under civil society's normative language as anything other than criminal. And that you can flow onto the CP talking about the reinterpretation of laws, because like all of the Sharp evidence is saying that under civil society's normal language, like Black women are viewed as criminal, which is why we need anagrammatical practices. Our presentation of the 1AC as practice building agency, what we should do in the face of violence. That's our first solvency. And the destruction of normal like project or the normal debate space. That's our second piece of solvency, like a mean making that relies on misogynoir and violence against Black women. You should vote after the presentation in and of itself. The academic and rhetorical project of the 1AC is a valuable and affirmable project. Our presentation of poetry as consciousness raising is injecting the scholarship into debate as an injunction and the otherwise normalizing anti-Black system of debate. Debate is a site of critical thinking. As such, the role of the ballot and the role of the judge is to affirm modes of thought that expands our horizons for justice. The 1AC's rupture allows for a reorientation of our politics towards reconfiguring our understanding of Blackness to open up the possibility for care and Black empowerment. Like it's a prerequisite. You have to vote app in order to do that. Like debate is both the site of what Morris calls push out as well as the site of educational normativity. This means that the 1AC's material agency, like building an ideological rupture, is uniquely germane. And you could also flow that onto the T arguments. The T arguments maintain the normativity that the app is trying to contest in the whole speech. Pathologization of Black women's performance in debate is a reason why our agency building and empowerment of Black women itself is a reason to vote app. Moreover, our scholarship disrupts debate's educational normativity that refines the anti-Black misogynoir of statehood and civil society. Our epistemology is uniquely valuable and it outweighs the claims to neg offense. In addition, our interpretation is key to better understanding the criminal justice system and its effects on a micro and macro scale. To be clear, anagrammatical is re-signifying otherwise known scenes of violence. Refer back to the Sharp card where she talks about recognizing the girl's neat braids. That is Black care. We claim that as solvency in the debate space and on systemic level. Onto the CP. The neg says that T is a voter. First, you can flow the case onto his voter for T, and saying that T is a voter isn't enough. You must defend the system that T like encourages and using the USFG, like what it upholds, that ultimately means that the CP fails because you cannot endorse anagrammatical without detesting the USFG. Like you cannot do both. The CP does not make any sense. The NEG's intention is to reduce, not to reveal, meaning that the NEG's framework continues the ability that debate has to sit comfortably. There's no confrontation, interrogation, or demands upon the debate space, just the continuance of the status quo. Debate is supposed to be a site of critical thinking. As such, again, the role of the ballot and the role of the judge is to affirm modes of critical modes of thought that expand our horizons for justice. There are three impacts to maintaining the status quo in debate. One, it perpetuates statehood, not agency, which the NEG already agrees is good. The NEG already says agency is good. Two, it continues the violent signifiers of the scenes in Black life. That was not contested by the NEG. That means that you have to agree with that. Three, there's no education on what we do in the face of violence. That's really important for making sure that there's Black care in our society and that Black women are able to continue their lives in a certain way. All of these impacts outweigh normal education and fairness because the idea of like normal education, normal fairness sits in between what Morris calls pushed out and educational normativity. Onto the Davis 19 card. The link on the neg is very weak. At this point, you can't really see the difference between the ath and the neg. Like here, boom. I would like to empower people to reinterpret the law. Now, what's the difference between our plans? There's no reason not to vote ath. Moreover, the neg admits that they don't need the ballot in cross X, and that wasn't thoroughly articulated because there's no distinction now between the ath and the neg. So you can't vote neg on the link if there's no distinction between what the ath and the neg is. That means that there's no link. I'm gonna skip this card. Sorry. Okay, the institution of policing is intrinsically violent. The culture of policing is embedded into the individuals who practice this enforcement and will not be permanently influenced by outside actors. Sam Levin, 2020. New York banned chokehold. Seattle required de-escalation training. Los Angeles restricted shooting at moving vehicles, but those reforms did not stop the police from killing Eric Gardner, Charlena Lyles, or Ryan Twyman, who died when officers used the very tactics that the changes were supposed to prevent. Departments hired more officers of color. African-American officers took over troubled departments, but as the death of George Floyd continues to spark a national reckoning over police violence, an avalanche of videos has shown militarized officers brutalizing protesters. City leaders are facing mounting pressure to recognize that those incremental reforms have not addressed systemic harms and, as some study shows, have not diminished bad behavior by the police. None of it is doing what it's supposed to do. De-escalation training isn't working. Using less violent methods isn't working. Having cameras for accountability isn't working. I'm going to cut the card at isn't working. This card is basically just saying, like, reinterpreting the law is not going to change how violence exists in Black lives. You can refer back to our evidence on the wake, on the weather. Violence just molds itself in order to continue to oppress Black people. Reinterpreting the law is not going to stop Black people from going to jail, Black women from being raped. Reform through government agency relies on the false perception that law is fair and objective. Policies like the counterplan sanitize the law and result in more oppression. Butler 16, you can just flow that as analytics for now. Also, they say that like there's no having more Black women in the debate space, which is a part of what the agency building does, outweighs people being uncomfortable to join the debate space. I am open for cross.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so can you explain how the AF and the CP are the same thing?
Yeah, so I asked a couple of questions in Cross X. The AF is just, the neg is just about encouraging people or empowering people to reinterpret the law. There's no guarantee that the reinterpretation is actually going to happen. I asked, are debaters able to do this or make this action? That wasn't really addressed. So it's just empowering people to reinterpret the law. So by any means, I can say I empower people to reinterpret the law. And now you also have anagrammatical practices there. I don't see a difference or a strong articulation of the link from the neg onto the act.
Okay. So So can you explain how, like, people not joining the debate space isn't a problem for your
Yeah.
app actually getting exposure?
I just don't think that the argument is valid. Like, debate is a scary thing. There's a bunch of movies out there about debaters crying because they're scared of debate. If anything, that outweighs someone hearing me talk about a poem and hearing me reading theory. At the same time, I think that this refusal, this interrogation encourages more Black women into the debate space. I think that that's real. I think that that can be seen, and that outweighs your argument on people in novice being afraid to move up to varsity.
Okay. Yeah, that will be time.
Okay.
All right. I'm just gonna do T for the speech. All right. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so again, to reiterate why actually getting people into the debate space is uniquely clear. There's nothing that the app is able to do if there's not engagement if there's not new engagement. At this point, there is okay, I'm pretty sure there's a 5th team, but there wasn't a 5th team yesterday. The fact that at this point, like, essentially there's not enough people that are actually in this debate space at this moment in PBL that actually have new engagement, because this is something where we've created a system where there's not enough people who have actually gotten engaged to actually have a system where people get any education, because it's a redux of people's arguments. There's no new exposure that the app is actually getting. So therefore, there's no empowerment that it can actually create, because no one is being newly exposed to the app, and there's nothing that goes on within there. And also, so on the fact that the app keeps saying people not being comfortable, like, ideally, yes, we wouldn't need to worry about this, but at the end of the day, people being comfortable is what is going to decide them actually moving up. It would be great if people were comfortable being uncomfortable, but that's not what's happening with the vast majority of people. We're clearly not getting this engagement, and that creates a system where there's nothing that's actually again, there's nothing that's actually being changed. And so on the point of the idea that debate movies are, like, inherently more the cause of this, like, there's frankly not enough of people who actually fully go through, first off, those movies, and also there's the entire space of the BDL is always going to be separate from any movie experience, and everyone knows that. Everyone knows that their experience isn't going to be just the same as a movie, but when there's going to be arguments that you know that the upper varsity sphere is something that you can't at all understand, then it's going to be something where people aren't going to want to engage in it whatsoever. If you just see a movie of people at, like, the collegiate level doing something that's specifically apparently interesting enough to make a movie about it, that's not going to affect people as much as knowing that if they move up to varsity, they have to find a way to debate something that doesn't use USFG. And what was I saying? Yeah, I guess also, so to just fully extend everything again, there's been no contestant, nothing contesting that the app isn't USFG, so there's obviously a complete link there. And also, yeah, I'll just go on, like, general fairness. Not only is it, like, it makes it difficult for other people, but specifically me in this debate round to engage, like, there's just not enough links to actually have a genuine discussion to go on here. So, like, it creates a situation where it's hard to actually engage and get a changing view if people are going to just immediately lock up and not fully have a discussion, because there's nothing really to discuss when they feel like they can't make any arguments that will go anywhere in the debate space. And yeah, what was I? Right. So the entire idea that what by saying the teeth that I'm promoting just like the normal structure of debate isn't true, because at the end of the day, I'm not saying that there can't be any critical discussions. I'm not saying that there can't be anything that is like anything that is a reading of your own theory or of your own experience. That's something that's completely okay and does work. But when people don't feel like they have any option, they don't feel like they can run a case negative, or they don't feel like they can run a standard counterplan or a DA, that is something that uniquely does cause people to not want to enter higher divisions and not want to engage with debate any further. Because if it's just that you have ideas, that's not something that's going to turn people off. What is going to turn people off is if they don't know how to come at those ideas. And that's what the affirmative does by not actually fully engaging through the USFG. And I guess I'll get more to the USFG critique and the counterplan, so yeah, and also, so the entire idea that the any actual spillover that the affirmative can have, even if you don't want to vote on the any of the impacts of fairness and of actual education that I've outlined, at the end of the day, the fact that people aren't coming into debate and aren't getting engaged does make it uniquely a fact that there is not any solvency outside of the ballot outside of the round with the affirmative. If there's no one new that is being engaged to these, that is interacting with these ideas, then there's no change that actually is able to happen, and therefore everything just remains stagnant. So at that point, if you're just going to the only thing that you can really say is a normal debate experience and just be the judge who votes on fiat and do whichever idea is better, and that in of itself is exactly what the AF is advocating is bad. So therefore, that within itself cannot be a reason to vote for the AF if there's no spillover whatsoever. And again, as I said, that's exactly what's happening when this is essentially a debate pool where everyone has faced everyone, because there's no one who is entering debate, because there's no place where people feel like they can engage. And again, that does not mean that you have to reduce everything to a completely standard normal AF where everything goes to the USFG and we all talk about how great America is, but there needs to be some level of familiarity that people feel like they can engage with, so that there can actually be an engagement, and that so people can actually join. And even if people do join with the current AF, if they don't feel like there's a place to engage with the AF, then there's not going to be any education, and there's not going to be any spillover of the AF's effects. There's not going to be any promotion of the anagrammatical if it continues to be locked within just a single circuit that is not growing. Then it's not actually promoting those critiques of debate. So there needs to be some engagement with a semi-standard form of debate to actually get the critiques of forms of debate to be more than something that we're just discussing among 8 teams. Yeah, I guess I'll just stop time there.
Cool. Ready for cross?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can start now. Wait, now? So last year, the whole BLA team ran a clown AF. How is that not exactly what you're saying about Black Femme?
I mean, yeah, like, I'm not going to say that was a great idea, but like, I feel like that was definitely re-engaging with it, and that was a problem, but that's not proof that my argument isn't real. It's just proof that we were really stupid when we were like, yo, let's run a clown AF.
Okay, so can't that just be applied to our argument? Like, that doesn't prove that it's not real. I'm not going to say that the AF is stupid, but like, wouldn't that be like not understandable for a lot of people? Like, Olivia hit Walter and Sadie last year for running a clown AF, and like, they were pretty confused about it. And I think that
I will completely say that clown AF in of itself is harmful to the debate space, and
so you're saying that
is not a valid argument. So yes, I'm saying my previous argument was really bad, but that's not proof.
Are you saying that so is Black Femme harmful to the debate space? I'm just not saying
not Black Femme in of itself, but not engaging with USFG and not creating a system where people feel like they can engage is directly harmful to the debate space.
So the fact that not engaging with the USFG, you're saying not engaging with the USFG is more harmful than the violence that the USFG perpetuates in the debate space.
it's more harmful when there's no one that can actually engage into the debate space, then yes. If it's not promoting the debate space, then in of itself, yes, that is harmful to the debate space.
Okay, so is that the argument for T as well as the link now? Because you're saying that now the link is USFG not being used. So is that also the argument on T?
Yes.
So if the AF were to win on USFG bad, will we win the round?
If the AF were to win on just the abstract concept that the USFG is bad, then no, because I'm not saying that we need to fully engage with the USFG in an actual real world sense, but we need to actually have some form in the debate space where people are comfortable engaging, and also where we can at least engage at the governmental level.
Sure. So if we say that the engagement with the USFG in the round is not needed, if we win on that argument, do we win the round?
If you win that USFG engagement within the round is not needed, then I suppose that takes out CP, but it doesn't prove that there's any reason why that's not needed to get people to engage. So no, it's not.
So how is the CP in and of itself contradictory? Yeah.
How is it?
Because the anagrammatical process inherently detests the use of the USFG. So how does that work?
I mean, you can still detest the USFG and have engagement with the abstract concept of the USFG and talk about the things that the USFG should, in an ideal world, be doing.
Okay.
All right. So, just CP at this point. All right, 3. Is everyone ready?
Yeah. Wait, Richard, are you good? Is he here?
I have to put my computer on the charger.
All right.
You said just the CP?
Yeah, just CP. Wait, what is my cat doing? Okay. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, so again, to restate why what the CP actually is, what we are doing, and what we need to do is actually have some base level of engagement at the governmental level. Again, that does not mean a complete embrace of the government. As the Davis 19 card is saying, we're not saying that we embrace the government. We're saying we reject the things that the government has interpreted, and then use that as a solution to reinterpret the words that, again, were made intentionally vague so that there can be loopholes, which also means that loopholes can go in the other direction. And that's how we can use the government as an actual means. And that's how things can actually be expanded beyond. And that actually gives the solvency of giving people uplift and feeling control of the law, in that they don't feel completely isolated from the actions of the government if they actually feel like they have input in the government. And that's what reinterpretation actually does. First off, okay, on the CP cards, yeah, okay, on the 11 card, the idea that policing is intrinsically, or I guess, again, actually, yeah, I'll talk about that later, but on the Butler card, so the entire idea that the counterplan isn't a policy. The counterplan is saying that we should engage with government. So it's not just saying that a law is fair and objective, because the literal point of the counterplan is saying that law isn't fair and objective, and that's how we can use it to make laws that currently are completely misapplied to actually have meanings. Laws that exist is completely not fair and objective. Again, that's because it's intentionally vague so that there can be loopholes. But that also means that if you can create that scholarship and if you can create that level of engagement at the government level, then yes, there is going to be reinterpretation so that those laws actually work out. And that's what's inherently necessary. And so the all of this is shows through on why the again, as the affirmative has conceded, they do not use the USFG. So that's the entire idea, that they can take out the link. Again, that's not doable. And the fact that the USFG is bad, again, we're not working through the USFG, but at the end of the day, we directly need to have some contact with USFG to create a system where there is further spread of actual ideas and actual solvency, because at the end of the day, that's what that's where laws are enforced, and that's how laws are made. And we don't have to agree with either of those things. In fact, we have to reject them. But that doesn't mean that we have to completely reject the idea of the institution that does make them, because at the end of the day, it is an institution. It is not a singular human being who is directly is made to enforce ideas of racism and discrimination. It's just something that is a vessel that can be used that is currently used to empower those, but that doesn't mean that the entire structure of the vessel, if it is reclaimed, is in of itself harmful. And that's what we're saying, is that we need to actually engage with it to that level. And that solves better than the AF, because first off, it leads to the spillover of people feeling like they do have power over their own laws and by a reinterpretation. And that's something that doesn't happen in the AF, because there's not that level of grand spillover where people who have no direct connection to the actual theory of the AF would have any experience of empowerment that does actually happen in the neg, because we do create that sense that you can actually create change. And also it is uniquely powerful because, again, the USFG is an inherently the USFG as it exists is a force that will work for evil and will work to minimize what the AF is doing and any solvency that the AF has. So it's uniquely key to actually engage at some level, again, to reclaim the USFG in of itself and make it so that it can't do that. That's key to have any solvency. And also the AF, I suppose, kind of made a vague statement that was, you could say that you empower people to change laws. Okay, you can say that. That would be great. I'm saying that, but that's not what your argument is. So I don't really get what that statement is. That's not any proof that the CP is bad or that the AFSOL is better. So yeah, in conclusion, they are inherently different because we instead of ignoring the USFG, we actually engage and reclaim the USFG, and that is key to have any solvency, and that's what causes the CP to be better than the AF. Again, you can still detest the USFG through the CP, and it doesn't make them unable to work together.
We're going to take 3 minutes of prep. Okay, we're ready.
Wait, I'm in the middle of a sentence for feedback.
What?
I'm finishing up a sentence. I'm typing up feedback. Let me finish my thought. I'm almost done.
Okay.
So when I come back, I know what's going on. All right. I'm done. They saved it. Okay. What's the order, Olivia?
Hold on. We also have our Zoom together. The order is CP, perm, then case.
Have a Zoom together. See what? You got what? The order?
It's CP, perm, then case.
Perm. Okay.
Perm.
Yes. Is that all?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very discouraging when you're laughing.
Yeah, it's really.
Oh no, I'm laughing because I'm thinking about the scene from My Hero Academia. I was watching earlier. I was.
Wow.
Okay. If everyone's ready, I guess I'll start.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start now. Okay, on to no one being newly exposed to the AF. You misunderstood understand the AF. The AF wants you to be uncomfortable, to question if you're being violent or not. Also, like, how about this? Like, last year, the whole BLA team ran a clown AF. Like, a clown AF. How is that not understandable? Like, how does that not discourage kids from joining debate? You need to look at, like, your own team before you say that Black Femme is not understandable. If it is, then make it understandable. The travel team reviewed the AF, and debaters must be accountable for trying to develop their own critical thinking. Even if the link is now the USFG, y'all can flow the whole case, and its extension can be flowed onto the USFG needed argument. That's our Fanon card. Agents of the government are intrinsically violent. Moreover, the AF thinks that the USFG should stop policing Black people, and the AF thinks that the USFG is a form of violence in Black life. The fact of the matter is that the CP is awash. They make no change to the status quo. Example, Abram X. Kendi is an anti-racist activist. He was on Times Magazine and works with government policy. What I'm not understanding is why the act the neg suggests is exclusive. Also, the neg doesn't solve for any of our harms in the whole case, meaning the content was dropped. That means we get full access to our solvency, which was our presentation of the 1AC as a practice building agency, what we should do in the face of violence, and a disruption of the normative project. That is Black care. We claim that a solvency in the debate space and on a systemic level. And then now onto perm. Like, how about this? Like, the neg, you can like reclaim the government on your own time, and in the meantime, like, you guys can vote on perm. There's no distinction between the two cases, and the link is still weak. Perm do both. Endorse the AF and then do the negative outside of the debate space. The neg's intention is to reduce, not reveal, meaning the neg's framework continues the ability that debate has to sit comfortably. There is no confrontation, interrogation, or demands upon the debate space, just the continuance of the status quo. Debate is supposed to be a site of critical thinking. As such, the role of the ballot and the role of judge is to affirm modes of thought that expand our horizons for justice. There are three impacts maintaining the status quo in debate. It perpetuates statehood, not agency. It continues the violent signifiers in the scenes of Black life. There's no education on what we do in the face of violence. All these impacts outweigh normal education and fairness, because the idea of normal education, normal fairness, sits between what Morris calls push out and educational normativity. We're winning this round. First, the role of the ballot was not contested, and again, the role of the ballot and the role of the judge is to affirm modes of thought that expand the horizons for justice. We get access to our solvency. That means we do what an AF is supposed to improve the status quo. Third, the CP is a wash. And then I'll get back to that. Now on to case Spiller, hericizes, I don't know how to say that, the criminalization and violence as a function of slavery and misogyny, or the dual imposition of the expectation of Black women as caregiver and slave as needed to be respectable, but never having access to respect. Reed briefly further contextualizes it to academia and the portrayal of Black urban debaters seen with negative expectations and violent signifiers. Debate needs anagrammatical practices in order to be ruptured. Moreover, debate will never reach its capacity of critical thought while it refuses the combos that AF brings to light. The AF prompts debaters to think about whether something is violent or not, and as Morris continues, what we should do in the face of violence, we denounce the violent signifiers that sit in debate comfortably by reimagining that is seen in the poem, creating the uncomfortable. As Sharp tells us, Blackness is anagrammatical and comprehensible under civil society's normative language as anything other than criminal. Now back on to the CP is a wash. Anagrammatical process detests the USFG, therefore they cannot act together. If you agree on our offense, the CP can not possibly, I believe that's his way. Okay, again, if you agree on our offensive CP, you cannot possibly vote neg. Okay, sorry. And then, okay. Okay, so the negative goes on to talk about how not using the USFG in debate is more violent than like the things the USFG does, which I really don't think makes sense. Again, like the whole point of the app is to make you uncomfortable, is to make you think about whether you're being violent or not. And I really don't think novice debaters being uncomfortable to join varsity debate outweighs the impacts that the USFG
At the bottom.
The next is a voter. First, you can like we said. First, you can flow the case onto his voter for T, and saying that T as a voter isn't enough for you. You must defend the system. T and USFG. The USFG upholds that ultimately means the CP fails because you cannot endorse medical without detesting the USFG.
All right, so I'm gonna go T and K. Or CP. I said K, didn't I? Wow. That's wild. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay, again, to put an overview on T, again, to say that they are not actually engaged, creating a space where anyone feels like they can engage. That creates a system where there's, again, no education and no engagement whatsoever, and it constricts the debate space. That is a voter in and of itself, because if we are not expanding the debate space, nothing that happens in the debate space actually has meaning. We need to expand the debate space, and if you're working directly against that, that is a voter, because that means that the debate space itself is inherently devalued, and that takes away from any power that we can have in any round. And onto just arguments they made. So, like, the AF wants you to be uncomfortable, and that's okay, but you have to accept that there's a point in which people are just that's good if you want to have people in round feeling uncomfortable, but if you're not getting people in round, then there's no benefit to it. If you're making the idea of it so uncomfortable that people don't enter rounds, then yes, that is a problem, because you don't gain anything from people just being uncomfortable with the abstract idea of wanting to be in this round rather than actually being in this round. That's where people need to be to have any impact within the debate space. So, like, yes, that is needed to have some level where people are here, and if people are feeling uncomfortable to the extent that they don't want to be in debate, then yes, there's nothing that you can gain from that. And also, like, again, the idea that clowns was a bad argument, like, wow, what a shocker. Like, I know clowns was really bad and it didn't help anyone. I'm not still running clowns. It was a stupid idea, and I agree that it forced people out. It created a space where people had no idea what anyone was talking about, because I had no idea what I was talking about, and no one else on BLA did, because it was a dumb argument about clowns. But yeah, again, just the fact that I've engaged in that doesn't mean that my point is invalid at all. And yeah, again, to say that I'm not advocating that the app has to do a completely straight line, normal affirmative, but they just have to make a space where there is not an over the top, like, where there needs to be some form of engagement, where even if people are like, okay, cool, let me just run this normal negative that I have and just go on with my day, at least then people are listening. But if there's not that space where anyone feels comfortable even coming out of, like, with what I see with a lot of debaters that do enter varsity, of just forfeiting after the first speech, like, that's not helpful. That's not something that is good. You need to create a space of engagement where you can at least maintain people beyond that point, and that allows for more people to say, at least it's doable, and that allows for more people to continue into varsity. And again, it's inherently necessary to get any sort of meaning out of debate like this round is with promoting these ideas. It's destroying the debate space in and of itself, because it's taking away any power it could have by taking people out of the debate space. Again, the debate space as it stands is not in the best place in VDL. We're not expanding it. All it's constricting, and a lot of that is because people are not feeling comfortable in going into the idea of varsity. Again, yes, they can be uncomfortable in the round, but if they're so uncomfortable to the point that they don't want to enter this space, then that is a problem. And onto CP, again, like, yes, the entire idea that the affirmative keeps spouting that the USFG is inherently bad. Like, yes, as it exists, it's inherently bad, but that doesn't mean it can't be reinterpreted and reused for actual helpful things. We're not just saying, oh, you got to listen to the USFG. No, we're saying we have to change the USFG, but just ignoring the USFG in and of itself is not something that's going to help anyone. It directly takes away from any power that the affirmative can actually have, because without engaging with the USFG, again, there's no community control spillover, like I talk about how it's inherently necessary to give people the feeling of power, and it also is necessary so that the USFG doesn't just do what it does and stops any progress within the AF by just shutting down ideas within the AF, by disempowering people by continuing to do what they do. And that is why it needs to be changed for any anything to happen. And also, like, the perm was brought up way too late, and also, again, doesn't make any sense because they keep railing on about how it doesn't make any sense to have an anagrammatic and also embrace and engage with USFG. Well, at that point, what we are saying is that that's what we need to do, and the affirmative seems to reject that idea. And also, again, even if the affirmative says it now, like, it's too late, but also it's just attack on. It's not actually engaging with the government in itself, because it's not bringing that idea. It's just saying, sure, maybe we can do it, which is like essentially just agreeing with the counterplan. That's not any form of perm offense, and you don't give it to them on that. So basically, in summary, yes, we need vote T because we show that it is necessary to expand the debate space, and CP because we need to engage at some level with the government.
I think we have 3 minutes of prep. We're going to run it. Is everyone good? Ready for me to start? I'm not hearing anything, so.
Yeah.
I'll give you a thumbs up. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay.
They were the ones you were hearing from.
Yes, sure. Okay, so I'm gonna say that CP then case. Okay.
Okay.
Are y'all good? Oh, why did someone start the timer? Oh,
It's not.
I
don't.
have one here. I'll do. Okay. I will start. Now you're going to vote F in this round. We are winning it. First, roll of the ballot was not contested. Again, the roll of the ballot and the roll of the judges to affirm modes of thought that expand our horizons for justice. Like, there was no argument about like we meet or this is what we do. And furthermore, I'm going to explain why they don't meet. Like, last time I checked, asking me to be a shiny Negro who wants to spend the rest of my life figuring out how the USFG will someday work for me is whack and does not expand horizons for justice or critical thought. Moreover, the neg chose the easy way out. You just ran T and barely. Like, you could have contested the method of the app, but that has not been clear. Second, we get access to our solvency. That means we do what an app is supposed to do, improve the status quo. Third, the CP is a wash. Anagrammatical processes detest the USFGs. Therefore, the app, they cannot act together. If you agree on our offense, the CP cannot possibly work, and you cannot vote neg. Fourth, you can also vote F on the fact that the neg's arguments were like low-key disrespectful, saying genuine education. How does our case not meet that? Vote F because everyone on the BLA team needs to pay attention and practice. Like, we literally went over this case. There should not be this much struggle in trying to find a link. Next, saying that reading Black theory is detrimental and harmful to the debate space is a bad argument. Black theory helps Black people and encourages Black girls in this space. That outweighs the argument of T on participation. That's the only thing that has been developed there. Again, there are 3 impacts to maintaining the status quo in the debate space. 1, it perpetuates statehood, not agency. 2, it continues the violent signifiers of scenes and Black life. And 3, there's no education on what we do in the face of violence. And we have been saying that since the second speech. That has not been addressed at all. All of these impacts outweigh normal education and fairness, because the idea of normal education and normal fairness sits in between what Morris calls push out and educational normativity. If you vote neg, you are endorsing push out and educational normativity. Next, the perm, basically, because I think this got a little confusing, the perm is saying that you can vote F and embrace the reinterpretation of laws outside of this space, because the reinterpretation or embracing, encouraging is not dependent on a ballot. The neg doesn't even do what they're saying they do. They don't change any laws. I asked in cross X, they say they encourage. Encouragement is not dependent on a ballot. Next, onto the case. Spiller historicizes the criminalization and violence as a function of slavery and misogynist war, the dual imposition of the expectation of Black women as caregiver and slave, as needing to be respectable, but never having access to respect. You can connect this back to the neg saying that like Black femme theory is detrimental when you're not using the USFG, or like asking me to be a shiny Negro. But then we did all of this work on case, we did all this work on the CP, and they're saying that we're not winning the round for whatever reason. Again, Reed Brinkley further contextualized localizes it to academia and the portrayal of Black urban debaters. The NEG does nothing on this. They have no access to our impacts. They don't solve our impacts at all. Like, you can see that with the negative expectations and violent signifiers that we see in debate. Debate needs anagrammatical practices in order to be ruptured. You cannot say that you want to maintain the normativity in debate and then say that anagrammatical practices can happen in the CP. That's not how it works. Moreover, debate will never reach its capacity of critical thought if we don't use anagrammatical practices. That goes back to the role of the judge and the role of the ballot, which again, you're going to vote, like, that's just a voter right there. The app prompts debaters to think about whether something is violent or not, what you should do in the face of violence, and that is spillover. Like, when you are having an interaction outside of debate, we need to learn how to be like decent and kind people who can have conversations, not say that a certain app is detrimental to the debate space because we're talking about how we're still, like, time accumulates and how we're still in the belly of the slave ship. That's whack. As Sharp tells us, Blackness is anagrammatical, incomprehensible under civil society's normative language as anything other than criminal. That is what the NEG is endorsing. Debate is, again, solvency. Our presentation of the 1AC is a practice building agency, what we should do in the face of violence. And I think that, like, that's just good. And that can also happen with people who are not just Black debaters. I think that outweighs people being maybe uncomfortable to join Varsity. There's a bunch of different factors that join. I said movies. Even if you're saying that that's not a good argument, just like, people get uncomfortable. We are all different people. The NEG just assumes that we're all the same. Like, we hear a Black woman talking about the problems in the world and you just don't want to talk to her. Like, why is that? I think that the role of the ballot and the role of the judge is a good way to contest that, to say that, no, we should be doing that. We should be paying attention at debate practice. That's why you should vote.
Okay. That was a good round. Sure. Cool. Good job.
Mr. Andrew, would you like to talk to us a little bit about more of your experience?
Yeah, I had a lot of thoughts while I was listening to your speech, especially I forgot the name. The piece of evidence about the way we talk about urban debaters. This was something I thought about a lot in advocating for the league in the early days and trying to raise money. And very often the way that I talked to students was different than the way that I talked to different types of potential funders. And I had conversations with because sometimes if we were meeting with someone who is potentially going to give money to the organization, like, often they want to meet a student or multiple students who have benefited from the organization. And I'll just I'm not necessarily saying that my approach to this was right or whatever, but for what it's worth, I would often have conversations with the students before we went into those meetings of, here's what I think these people are going to expect to see and hear from you. And not saying that that's, the way that they have to present themselves or anything, but I guess we were very sort of strategic or pragmatic about it of, like, if you want these rich people's money, and I don't think any of these things were lies about, like, what the students felt like they were getting out of debate. But yeah, I don't know. I guess my thoughts on this are still sort of mixed up right now. But yeah, there were difficult decisions to make about how we were going to present ourselves. And I tried to, without telling the students what to do or how to present themselves, to talk to them about what were the, advantages and disadvantages of presenting themselves in different ways. And there's also certain things that we didn't have control over, right? When people are writing a news article or something, when a journalist comes, I think journalism is especially bad about this. They're on deadlines and they're not necessarily incentivized to understand that well what's going on, and they fall very easily into these kinds of sort of lazy characterizations and like using that language, like defying the odds or that kind of thing. And part of that's the audience they're writing for, and part of that's just laziness on their part. So, we also had decisions to make at times about, is it desirable to try to seek coverage for this particular event, or how are we going to choose what to show, like how are we going to frame ourselves for the journalists, knowing that we're not going to have full control over how they ultimately present things. And I think it's good that there are now more adults of color who are involved in the league and are able to guide students on that, because obviously it's not something that I had direct experience with. I mean, I had read Fanon, and I'd encountered some of the arguments that you presented, or thought about some of the things that you presented, but ultimately I'm just not as well positioned to guide young people of color on those kinds of things as I think other adults of color are. And even at that time, we were trying hard to recruit other adults of color to participate as volunteers and members of the board and that kind of thing. But I think there's even more so than I think any organization benefits from having diversity, but I think one like this especially is much stronger as a result of having a lot more adults of color involved now.
I'm finally done.
Word.
Yeah.
So tired.
There's a lot more. I think that there's a lot more engagement now with like adults of color in the league. It's nice. Have a lot of guidance. Fun.
I guess the last thing I'll say is just, personally, it's very rewarding that all of this is still going, and that there are still people like yourself who are, energetically participating in this and hopefully finding value in it. And, that this is something that is worth spending your Saturday on is good to see. And I'm grateful that you are here educating us.
I think that we're going to get some feedback now.
I have a slight preference against going first, but I'm willing if no one else.
I don't want to go first.
I'll go. I just want to.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Thank you, Ty.
Okay, so I don't think we're given decisions. So I'll start off with the one in. I'll go speech by speech. I'm not going to talk on like the one AC. Actually, for the one AC, for the performance, I'm just like trying to figure out, like, when you read the performance and then when you read the cards that Olivia read, there's the performance and then there's that. But I think that what I need to see throughout the whole round is an extension of the performance and why it's important to your solvency. Because I remember the summer I went for camp is when I started reading the performance. I would read it in the 1AC, but never actually extend it and say why it matters. And then they told me that there needs to be a reason why it's there, because that's the reason of the performance, is to have value. So I think that just in the future, you want to make sure that you explain what it means throughout the whole round, because it also gives you more offense. And then now connecting that back to, say, the counterplan on the negative side, which I'm not really sure what's going on there, when they talk about this idea of basically combining the United States federal government with the idea of anagrammatical, however you want to phrase that, I think that then it's now, plus the performance, what is going to be the net benefit of the counterplan that the affirmative is not able to do? Because and this is for Finn too, like for Finn, I think that when you have a counterplan, there's always supposed to be a net benefit when you read a counterplan. You can't just read a counterplan and not have a net benefit. So for you, next time you do go up against an affirmative like this, which I'm pretty sure it would just be Ariella, you want to make sure that if you are going to read a counterplan, say, this is the counterplan, and then go to the net benefit and say, this is the reason why we, the negative, with the counterplan affirm. In this round, you would then have to explain why you saw better for interrogating the violence that happens against Black men and women specifically, and most importantly, Black women. And that is something that's absent from this round. And I think that is where the counterplan really fall short. The reason why I fall short is because you don't really explain that card. You go a little bit about saying the idea of reinterpreting the 13th Amendment, and also the ability for that to kind of allow for a reclaiming of agency for Black people. But I don't understand what that means in the round, especially when you don't really extend it well enough. So I think that your biggest offense for the negative is the topicality argument, which is focusing on, one, the participation in debate space, but also the other part that talks about how lack of engagement for the United States federal government is a problem. So I think that for the participation in debate, that is an argument that you have to make sure that you explain a little bit better, because I think that for me, if I was the affirmative and you said that, they kind of did already touch on this, but if I was affirmative and you said that there's a lack of participation in debate because people are scared to go against arguments that are potentially, say, like high theory or too critical, then I wouldn't say that it's because of the arguments that kind of disencourage them to be a part of the varsity debate, but more so the ability for them to be prepared for when they do get to varsity in the first place. So it's not what's happening in varsity, it's what's happening before they get to varsity. That is an argument that could have been made from the affirmative. I think that it's a good kind of argument to try to say that it's hard to kind of engage in these types of debates. But I think that your biggest argument would definitely be what it means for an affirmative like that to engage in with the United States federal government. But the next problem I do have is that when we talk about the United States federal government in this round, the way that the negatives making it seem like is that as if the affirmative reading the their AF is like creating something special outside of this round. Like the government isn't here, and the only thing that's really happening is in debate is role playing, but there is no role playing in this debate, because you already said in your first speech, what you completely started with, was that this round isn't about fiat because you're not role playing. Okay, so that should have been your biggest argument on topicality, which should have been the idea that they're not going through the United States federal government, or they're not participating in the government, which means that should have been your biggest argument. And I think if that was your biggest argument on the topicality flow, then you would have had a better chance of basically having an ability to get any offense, because it was hard for you, like you said, in this round to have any offense because based on what she was reading. So yeah, and then also for Finn. Yeah, so like I don't actually know how many times. I'm pretty sure like throughout the last like few years you went against arguments like this. So I think that at this point in your debate career, that you should definitely have already had a lot of topicality files or framework files that you could have definitely had a better round. I think that you did take too much prep time in your first speech. You took about like 6+ minutes. And I think that is, of course, because you probably weren't prepared. But I think that after this round, definitely focus on your framework and what you're going to read. If you don't know what kind of real arguments to read against it, whether it be case or not. But yeah, like I'm not going to go too much. I've already been talking for too long, so I'm good.
Well, the good news, Ty, is you kind of said everything that I wanted to say also. I was pretty much just nodding along the whole time you were talking. I feel like there were some, I think this has often been my, I don't know, I feel like there's no good language for describing this, say that, performance-based arguments or something like that. The thing that I'm often left wondering as a judge, or where I feel like the argument is potentially vulnerable, is what is my ballot accomplishing, or like why are these reasons to vote for you? And I think that's somewhere where the negative, if you wanted to make more like substantive arguments on the case, I think that's one of the places you could have tried to push at, is like, well, what does anagrammatical practice mean? What is like what's happening during the debate like that? And I think it also could have been better developed by the affirmative. I mean, you kind of got away with not developing it as much.
So I think you need to be using your cross-ex as prep time. I don't know why you're not doing that, especially since you used all that prep time at the beginning. I just feel like, just pretend like you're asking questions and answering questions just to like prepare. Like, no, we can't even see you. Like, I don't think anyone cares, but we can't even see you, so you ought to just use that time to protect. I At first, I didn't really see what you were going for on topicality until the end of the round. Everything just clicked for me for like why you would choose that strategy. And I don't know if this is the same thing that like Sadie and Wexler were complaining about yesterday when they had Majigger as their judge. To say, I don't know his name.
Jesse?
Yeah, when they had
Jesse.
Jesse as a judge, like they were upset. And if this is their strategy, I kind of see what the issue was, because I actually like this strategy now that I've seen the whole thing play out in a debate round. But I think there's like there's some issues with it. So my first thing is that the counter plan needs to be about how your counter plan is just like talking about like just a theory of how your counter plan would solve. And I feel like that's the wrong approach. What you need to do is talk about all the specific acts of violence in the 1AC and use that as a reason for how your counter plan, for how like the affirmative cannot solve. This always happens in Ariella debates, and I just let it slide. But I just don't understand why y'all don't talk to her about her solvency. I don't know what anything she talks about, how anything she talks about stops little girls from getting thrown by the police. Like, I really don't understand, like, what, like, so what? You read a poem. Like, that's not going to stop a little girl in Houston from getting thrown again. That's not going to stop the criminal record of the girl. It was like she had a criminal record for throwing a can. Was that the ask? Did I understand that wrong?
No. It was like she was having an upset day.
Like, this girl's having an upset day, and now, like, the police are harassing. Like, I don't understand how, like, the affirmative solvency mechanism fixes those specific issues that they talk about. Like, I don't know how they're fixing those harms on, like, an everyday real-life level. And I feel like your counter plan is very reasonable. Like, we still need to interact with the government somehow, because the government, that like, police officers are government officials. Like, on a local level, they're government officials and they get grants from the federal government. Like, there's ways to talk about like how you can fix that. And I feel like you're not at all using your counter plan to like address that. And I feel like that's what you need to do for that specific advocacy. And I feel like that also takes away a lot of the offense that the affirmative has about you not engaging with them. Because I also don't understand, I'll talk about this later when I get to talking about the affirmative. But let me read what I wrote. You're talking about this counter plan very meta. I don't hear how the ask solves. The only clear ask solvency about the constructive is the turn on T. Now on to T. So this is what I started right